common greeting on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is Shana Tova L'Karov V'Larachok. A happy and healthy new year to those who are distant and those who are close by. And in this day and age of streaming, we say L'Arachok to those who are distant because they are streaming this service and they're not able to be here in person. We say Shana Tova to you. And to those people who are here in our midst this evening, we say Shana Tova to you as well. I just want you to know this is not going to be a political sermon. The problem is that our politicians give us such good examples of behaving poorly. It's hard not to use them as an example for behavior we ought not engage in. Politicians often behave poorly, regardless of which side of the aisle they're sitting on. I remember when Hillary Clinton referred to supporters of Donald Trump as the basket of deplorables. It was her first step, I believe, towards losing the election. Calling people names is never healthy. And when Donald Trump then said the Mexican government is forcing their most unwanted people into the United States, they are in many cases criminals, drug dealers, rapists, etc., it was probably a step towards his victory. In 2019, Benjamin Netanyahu sensed that he was going to lose the premiership in Israel, went to the central bus station with a megaphone and warned the cheering crowds that the Palestinian Authority is coming out with an official statement, and I quote, "Go out to vote and bring down Netanyahu." All three were guilty of the exact same thing, in my opinion, and that is leveraging inner fears for their own power grab. This year, one of our senators stood in front of the Senate and held up a book that he felt should have been censored. You may have recalled the name of the book, called The Anti-Racist Baby. I, of course, went out immediately and bought the book, as did millions of other people. All are guilty of the exact same thing, leveraging inner fears for their own power grab. They were using the paranoia that bias creates to motivate people towards action. They were preying on prejudice. They're coming for your guns. They're coming for your rights. It's us versus them. And in many cases, unfortunately, it works. Because deep down inside, we all have biases. We all have prejudices. And we all have preconceived notions. To deny our biases is to give them power. It's at the heart of our inability to form a coherent pathway towards citizenship or to formulate some common sense gun legislation. We are afraid of each other. It comes from family, and it comes from friends, and it comes from the media. The fear, while in most cases is completely unfounded, it feels real. And our visceral, if not our acknowledged response, is often subconscious. We don't even know most of the time that we're acting on them. And when we do, we are so quick to justify our actions and our opinions. Once we build those walls of making sure someone knows they are other than us, all other walls All other borders, all other security fences shrink in comparison to the damage that we have already accomplished. The wall of othering is far stronger, far more lasting, far more impactful than any physical structure we seek to build in our own defense. Us versus them represents the most basic of tribal instincts. And you know what I've always said, that being Jewish means that there is more to life than succumbing to our basic animal drives. We are instructed time and time again that we are given the ability to overcome our most primitive drives and instincts. 36 times in the Torah, it states some version of V'chi yagoritecha ger be'artzachem lo tonu oto. When strangers reside with you in your land, you shall not wrong them. Ke'ezrach mikem yiyeh lachem hager agaritechem v'ahavta lo kamocha ki gerim hayitem beretz Mitzrayim ani Adonai Elohechem. The stranger who resides with you shall be with you as a citizen. You shall love each one as yourself, for you know what it felt like to be strangers in a strange land, born of an ancient world in which others are regularly enslaved, regularly abused, regularly traded like commodities, trafficked. The Torah says no. Unfortunately, we haven't come so far. In our world, to the enslaved, abused, and trafficked, we have added excluded, banned, and exported, all out of a fear, often without any foundation whatsoever, judgment without any justification, racism without any rationale. For the Torah, the stranger never meant strange. Jessica Nordell wrote in an amazing book called The End of Bias, A Beginning. Many of us have experienced with others that lead us to wonder whether biases is playing a role. But those of us who have not lived through the dramatic discontinuity in how we appear to the outside world may not have the opportunity to confirm these hunches. We may be able to verify them to ourselves if we lose or gain significant weight or acquire a visible disability. Jessica Nordell is teaching us it is so hard for us living here right now to even recognize that there is such a thing as a bias in the world. We first can feel them once we change, she says. Or if we, she says, travel to countries where skin color carries different meaning. Like a black student who told me, she says, about the strange sensation she felt when traveling to Italy, which he realized was the feeling of not being followed in stores by suspicious salespeople. Eventually, many of us will feel the discrimination and the disrespect that await the elderly. But often the bias we encounter remains difficult to pinpoint. So let's do just a thought experiment for just a second. What is your reaction to this statement? Angel food is white, devil's food is either black or brown. Angel food is white. Devil food is black or brown. Angels are white while devils are black. So now ask yourself, check yourself. Does that statement seem absurd to you? If so, you might be a racist. As Nordell points out, the slow-motion murder of George Floyd by the Minneapolis police officer in the summer of 2020 revealed a casual savagery so dehumanizing and horrific, it shocked the world. Whether you believe his death was due to systemic racism or an incident of racism, you cannot deny that it was race-related. And I hope and I pray our society is changing. You know that diversity training now in this country is a multi-billion-dollar-year industry. Curtailing biased behavior seems to require paying attention to the differences, the very opposite we're trying to be blinded to. So I'm asking you today not to change anything. That change will come if you do just this one thing: acknowledge that we see color and that being colorblind is not a good thing. There is an incredibly disturbing story in which Noah, having emerged from the ark, seeing the desolation, he gets drunk. He passes out only to realize that the next morning that his son Ham has seen him naked, and in Noah's embarrassment, he curses Ham. Vayomer arur Canaan eved avadim hiyeh le'achav. He said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves shall he be to his brothers." That's the biblical text. But the rabbinic commentary to that text is far more upsetting, and one in which we must raise our voice in objection to its bigotry. Somewhere between the 3rd and the 5th century crept into our tradition a completely unacceptable statement. In describing the curse that Noah gave to Ham, his son, Rav Huna says the following: "You have prevented me from doing something that is done in the dark, therefore your seed will be ugly and dark-skinned." And if it isn't clear enough, Rabbi Chia goes on to say, Ham came forth black-skinned. It's almost inconceivable to me that a voice from our sacred tradition is so blatantly racist, teaching that black skin is a punishment. And so today I call it out. And when we see racism in our country, today we must call it out. We must do so not because we're woke, not because we live in a time and a place and a position of privilege, not because it's in style, not because we hope that if we ever find ourselves in the same position, someone else will stand up for us, not because we were once victims of bigotry and we hope that other people will come to our aid. No, we must do so because our tradition demands it of us, because God requires it of us. Daniel Alexander Payne wrote, "Black freedom did not arise from the charity of presidents, but from the sovereign hand of God." 2013, Tim Minchin was awarded an honorary degree from Western Australia University, and he was invited to address the graduating class. He suggested that more important than anything they might learn in a textbook is that they learn to identify their biases, their prejudices, their privileges, and do not exempt their own beliefs and opinions from the intellectual rigor they were taught in class. He said, be hard on your opinions, that your own opinions should be constantly and thoroughly examined. We must think critically and not just about the ideas of others, but we have to be hard on our own beliefs. Take them out onto the veranda and beat them with a cricket bat, he said. Be intellectually rigorous. Identify your biases, your prejudices, and your privilege. Most of society's arguments, he went on to say, are kept alive by a failure to acknowledge nuance. We tend to generate false dichotomies, and then they try to argue one point using two entirely different set of assumptions, like two tennis players trying to win a match by hitting beautifully executed shots from either end of separate tennis courts. Our country is in a dangerous place. The divisions are deep. The anger and the hatred is indisputable. It's manifest in so many of our daily actions. And if we don't do as the rapper Ice Cube says, and I paraphrase, if we don't check ourselves, we're going to wreck ourselves. Please join me this year in making a resolution to be more open, to be more caring, to be more loving in the coming year. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.